Alright, dear class, this is a video instruction for how to participate in our first Research Ethics Forum. And this Research Ethics Forum is on a study, a very interesting study called the Blue Eye, Brown Eye Experiment, BEB for short. You might have heard of this experiment, or you might not. That doesn't matter. Because you are provided with a link to watch it and you're supposed to watch it. Anyway, so the goal of this forum is to provide a platform for the class, that's you, to analyze and to exchange opinions on the ethical aspects of the BEBE experiment. A bit of background on this study. The study or experiment took place in the form of an in-class exercise with a group of third grade, I believe, students in America. And this in-class exercise known as the BEB experiment was organized by a Jane Elliott, a teacher. The goal of this exercise or experiment is to illustrate how easy or natural that racial and ethnic discrimination can occur. And the backdrop of this experiment is the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. Anyway, I found a very good and not long, I think 15 minutes, I believe, video sort of documentary of this BEB experiment. I personally find the BEB experiment very illuminating, the result very shocking, but it has all the cool aspects, scientifically speaking, of a exciting experiment. But of course, here we're not supposed to look at or focus on the scientific merits of the study. Rather, your task is to analyze the ethical aspects of the BEB experiment. That is, if you are RIB, right? If you're on the Institutional Review Board, your task then is to decide or determine whether or not Ms. Jane Elliott should be allowed to conduct the BEB experiment, obviously from an ethical point of view. So that suggests the bulk or the main content of your post, which we'll be talking about later, should be about ethical evaluation of study, but sometimes, of course, you may need to refer to the scientific value or merits of study to make an ethical argument. That will be fine. Just do not spend too much time talking about whether or not, for example, this particular experiment has a good design, or whether or not the variables are chosen wisely. So that's not the purpose of this activity. More specifically, you're supposed to do three things. First, obviously, is to watch the YouTube clip mentioned above. Second, you should provide analysis to the ethical aspects of the study using the framework of ethical decision making that we discussed in Lecture 4, Special Topics on Ethics, Research Ethics 3. And you write up a short post and post your opinion to the forum section of Laulima. Later on, I'll point you in this video clip where to post your opinion. The format of this forum is like this. So 5 of the students will be quote-unquote the speakers. Okay, missing a end quote here. So the speakers will start the forum by posting their assessment of the ethical aspect of the BEB experiment using one of the 5 approaches to ethical judgments. if you recall, the first one is the utilitarian approach, and the second is the rights approach, the virtual approach, the common good approach, and the fairness/justice approach. Okay, so these are the 5 approaches that you must be using. And I have designated through random assignment which approach these 5 students will use for their post. And then, after the 5 students post their assessment, the remainder of the class will become the respondents, and you will take turn to comment on the speaker or a previous respondent using the approach that again I designated to you. And let's figure out what this means by looking at this table. So here this table has 1, 2, 3, 6 columns and several rows. So each column designates, well, the first column designates the approach that the speaker will use, the approach the speaker and the respondents will use, as well as the deadline by which the speaker and respondents must post their opinions. This column designates the position that each of the respondents must take when they post their own writing. So the rows obviously are well, the rows provide the information on which approach that the speakers and respondents will use. So utilitarian approach, the rights approach, the virtual approach, the common good approach, and the fairness approach. Okay, so for example, through random assignment, Alex will be the speaker using the utilitarian approach. And Alex must post his writing, his assessment of the BEB experiment from the using the utilitarian approach but latest by 4 p.m. of June 13th. So, well, of course, Alex can post his writing before 4 p.m., but latest by 4 p.m. So whenever Alex posts his writing, then Gabby will read, obviously, Alex's writing, and then he will write up something that is against Alex's position. And Gabby should post her writing latest by 10 p.m. of the same day, that is June the 13th. And then Cortez will pick up from there, reading Gabby's post and write up something, also from the utilitarian approach against Gabby's position. Although Cortez's position does not have to be consistent with Alex's approach, right? So the only job that Cortez need to do is to argue against Gabby's approach using the utilitarian approach. So Cortez should post his writing latest by 3 p.m. of the next day, June 14th. Okay? So similarly, Nicole Tanaka will be the speaker using the rights approach, and all the speakers, they will start at the same time, 4 p.m. Sorry, all the speakers will start at the supposedly the same time, 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. But then all of them should post their writing at the same time, 4 p.m. June the 13th latest. Of course, as I said, all the speakers and respondents can choose to post their writing whenever they're done after reading the previous person's posts. So again, Nicole will post her writing latest by 4 p.m. of June 13th, and then Ken will use the rights approach, the approach that Nicole used, to argue against Nicole on whether or not the BEB experiment should be conducted, and then Rachel will read Ken's writing and then argue against Ken. And then Ken's writing should be posted latest by 10 p.m. of June 13th, and Rachel should post her writing latest by 3 p.m. of the next day, and so on and so forth, right? So Mika will be the speaker using the virtual approach. Ishmael will be using the approach to argue against Mika, and Jared will be using the virtual approach to argue against Ishmael. Piper will be the speaker using the common good approach. Grace will be the first respondent. Kylie will be the second respondent. Grace will be responding to Piper's position. Kylie responding to Grace's position. The only exception is Lex. So Lex will be the speaker of the fairness approach, but then because we run out of people, so we don't have any respondents to Lex. But then Lex is also supposed to submit his post. Sorry, I don't know the gender of Lex. Sorry about that. But anyway, so Lex should post the writing by 4 p.m. of June 13th. So anyway, here's an sort of elaboration of what I just said. Sorry about that. What happened? Okay. So anyway, so just to emphasize, right? So all these people, so for example, Alex, Gabby, and Cortez, you're supposed to use the utilitarian approach to evaluate whether or not Jane Elliott should or should not conduct a study. So Alex and Nicole and Mika and Piper and Lex, you are free to choose your stance. So Alex, you can argue from this particular perspective that the BEB experiment can be conducted, or you can argue that it cannot be conducted, should not be allowed to be conducted. Nicole, similarly, you can argue from the rights approach that a study should be allowed to be conducted, or you can argue that the study should not be allowed. Similarly, Mika, Piper, and Lex, the only constraint here are on the respondents. So Gabby, you must argue against Alex, whatever Alex's position is, and Cortez, you must argue against Gabby, whatever Gabby's position is. Similarly, Ken, you will argue against Nicole, whatever Nicole's argument is. Rachel, you will argue against Ken, whatever Ken's position is. Ishmael, you will argue against Mecca, whatever Mecca's argument is. Jared against Ishmael. Grace against Piper. Kylie against Grace. And, well, nobody against Lex. Anyway, about the post, I don't have any requirements on the length of the post, but the post must contain certain elements depending on your role. So if you're one of the speakers, your post must contain the following elements. First, a definition of your designated approach. For example, if you're Alex, then supposedly or ideally or preferably, you will start your post by saying that, okay, so the utilitarian approach states that, the definition. Then you will describe your position. For example, you can say, well, drawing on the utilitarian approach, I argue that Ms. Jane Elliott should or should not, that's your choice, be allowed to conduct the experiment. And then, of course, you should substantiate your position. You should elaborate on your reasoning. This is because, and you should cite at least one example scene from the clip, right? So you should watch the clip. So, cite at least one example scene from the clip to substantiate your reasoning. For example, you can say, and as an illustration to my point, what happened to the children, or, what Jane Elliott did at the time of the clip, suggested or show or, whatever they want to say about the scene. And then you should obviously tie the scene back to your argument. Okay. For the respondents, your post must contain the following elements. First, you must provide a brief summary of the speakers if you're respondent 1, or the previous respondents if you're respondent 2, position argument. So for example, who is the first? Okay, so Gabby is the first respondent, so you can say, well, Alex argued that the BEB experiment should or should not be allowed because, brief summary, and then Gabby, you should state your position because, all respondents are supposed to argue against the previous person. Then you would say, well, however, I argue that, and then you provide your reasoning and cite one example scene from the clip to substantiate your argument. Okay? All right, so for the requirements, your comments on others' posts must be polite and courteous. Even though you're supposed to argue against other people, be aware that your language should be civil, right? It should be a civil conversation, not a nasty one, so to speak. So you will receive 0 points and be subject to further disciplinary action if you use offensive language. You will lose half of the points, that is 3 out of 6, if you're late for any amount of time within the first hour after the deadline. So this is rather severe because your lateness, especially if you're the speaker or respondent 1, will severely affect the progress of other people. And then you will lose the other half if you're late beyond the first hour. I hope this does not happen, but in case, that the previous person is late, then you do not see their post by the deadline, then you become the speaker and start from there. Or the first respondent, right? Or respondent 1. So for example, if let's say Alex was late, so Gabby, then you'll become the speaker and Cortez will become respondent 1. Say Alex is on time but Gabby is late, then Cortez will become the first respondent responding to Alex's position. Okay, I hope that's clear. Similarly, let's say, another example, if Nicole's late, then Ken will be the speaker. If Ken's late, then Rachel will become respondent 1. Okay. You can find a document on the 5 approaches to ethical decision making under the folder Forum 1. So this document will also be placed under this folder Forum 1. And of course, you can refer to the slides as well. This activity is rather open, so you can consult the internet, that's okay, and other sources, but you must use one of the 5 approaches that is designated to you. Okay, so this should be the bulk of your post. This activity is worth of 6 points and will be your homework assignment 3. I will grade your post based on the following criteria. First, whether or not your argument is relevant. This will be relevance is worth 2 points. For example, did you use the designated approach? Did you comment on the right post? Right? Second criterion is quality of argument. This is worth 3 points. For example, did you make use of class materials? Is your argument logical? Were the scenes used and cited used appropriately? And don't worry about citation, right? So this is not a sort of a writing intensive class. Don't worry about APA. Just make it clear that I'm citing this from the clip, and here's the timestamp. Last criterion is writing. 1 point is the writing easy to follow? There are any typos, grammatic errors, and incoherent sentences. Okay, I think this is rather elaborate, and I think it's clear. But in case of questions, let me know. All right. So good luck. Should be fun. Look forward to reading all of your posts. Alright, so obviously I forgot to tell you where to post your writing. So this is Laulima, the resource page of our summer class. So you should be able to see this tab here that says forums. Okay, so click into it. Then you should be able to see Research Ethics Forum 1, the ethical aspects of the blue eye, brown eye experiment. I have already created 5 conversations, or topics, I should say, based on the 5 approaches. So we have the fairness approach, and this to analyze the BEB experiment using the fairness approach. The speaker is Lex. And the deadline to post the post. The common good approach, speaker is Piper, respondent 1 is Grace, respondent 2 is Kylie. The virtual approach, speaker is Mecca, respondent 1 is Ishmael, and respondent 2 is Jared. The rights approach, speaker is Nicole, respondent 1 is Ken, respondent 2 is Rachel. And the utilitarian approach, speaker is Alex, respondent 1 is Gabby, respondent 2 is Cortez. Okay, so to start the conversation, so to speak, obviously you will click into the right thread. So let's say you're a Mecca, and then so you will click on the virtual approach. And for now, of course, there are no messages, but then to start a conversation, you will click on Start a New Conversation. Right? And then you will give yourself a title. Well, I agree. Something like this, whatever. Obviously, a title that makes sense. Okay? And then you start typing. I agree because, or, the what approach is this? The virtual approach. The virtual approach. State stats. Whatever. Okay. So this is your post, and then when you're done, you would post. Okay. And then who's the respondent 1? Okay, Ishmael is the respondent 1. And then obviously you will click on Mecca's writing to see what she writes about, and then when you're ready, you will hit reply, and then type your title here, and then type your response here. I disagree. Oh, okay, so you should say Mecca's position, is that, okay, and then when you're ready, you post. And then the last respondent, who's the last respondent? I'm sorry, who's the last respondent? Anyway, okay. Respondent, oh, Jared. Okay, so Jared will be the last respondent, and then Jared will reply to Ishmael. Reply, type your title clearly, type your response here, and then Ishmael's position is that, okay, and then you post. Alright, so that will be a complete thread of conversations. I hope that's clear enough. Okay, so I'll delete all these so that you can start anew. All right, I think okay, so lastly I can show you the resources. Forum 1, here's the folder. This is the instruction that we just went through, and this is a summary of the 5 approaches or sources of ethical standards that you're going to use. Okay, the same as we talk about in slides. Okay. Anyway, so let me know if you have questions. I will send out an email with the link to the video instructions. Okay. See you later.